So in the centenary celebrations at the Dutch TT in Assen less than 2 weeks ago, Fabio Quartararo starting from pole position in Yamaha's special anniversary livery. Marc Marquez, though, wasting precious little time in taking control of the Grand Prix. His brother Alex, though, suffering a fracture in his left hand off that contact early on with Pedro Acosta as they fought for pole position. Marco Bezzecchi coming through to complete his first double podium on the factory at Aprilia as Marc Marquez got the party started. What a moment as the number 93 became the first rider in history to win 3 successive sprints and 3 successive Grand Prix. Undefeated in Aragon, undefeated in Mugello, and undefeated last time out in Assen. And of course we are now at his beloved Sachsenring, where he will start from MotoGP pole position at number 73. Tough conditions, though, in prospect for what is now a depleted MotoGP field. As we mentioned when in the build-up there, we were just talking about turn 4 and what an impact it's played already on proceedings here today. Marc Marquez on pole position on a front row which features Johann Zarco and Marco Bezzecchi, the Italian, on the front row of the grid for the first time on the factory at Aprilia. But just when you thought things couldn't get any worse for Red Bull KTM Tech 3, unfortunately it has. Already missing Italian Enea Bastianini from this weekend's action. Enea trying to recover from a real nasty bout of appendicitis back at home in Italy. We wish Enea a speedy recovery, which left them down to one rider, Maverick Vinales. But if you joined us this morning in what was a dramatic Q2 session on his outlap, powering through turn 4, unfortunately Maverick Vinales did need to go for treatment at a nearby local hospital, and he has been sadly declared unfit. Dislocated left shoulder, which was immediately put back in place at the track, but he has been diagnosed with a small fracture in that left shoulder, which certainly rules him out for the remainder of this German Grand Prix weekend. So no Red Bull KTM Tech 3 participation here, and you have to say there's probably big doubts about both Bastianini and Vinales' participation in round 12 next weekend at the Czech Republic in Brno. Marc Marquez, though, Marc Marquez is having very little problems finding his fast form, rain or shine, once again here at the Sachsenring in our 15-lap sprint coming up, in about 20 minutes' time. If he is to prevail once again, it would be already in round 11 his 10th sprint victory of the season, which would be a new record. The previous highest winning tally in the sprint format was Jorge Martin, who mustered 9 back in 2023. So he's going for double figures, is Marc, and he has been awesome. As we mentioned, a brilliant 127.811 in super tricky conditions this morning. Maverick Vinales and Jack Miller also caught out by that real treacherous turn 4. But once again, for the 8th time in MotoGP, the World Championship leader, 68 points clear in the standings, finds himself in very, very familiar territory here in Germany. He is back on pole.
A lot was thrown at Marc Marquez, as it was everybody in qualifying earlier on today. Such challenging conditions, that's how challenging it was, with Marc Marquez almost unseated coming down the Ralph Bollmann curve. But as is so often the case in his glittering career, particularly here at the Sachsenring, Marc Marquez had an answer to every challenge thrown ahead of him. The main challenge came from Johann Zarco, of course, coming within a 10th of pipping Marc Marquez to what would have been a shot pole out of qualifying 1 for the Frenchman. And of course he will be one of many looking at these conditions and thinking, with very little to lose, he can throw the kitchen sink at this.
Lowest qualifying of the season so far for Alex Marquez. There are mitigating circumstances for that, as you'll see on screens there briefly. We saw the heavy taping and strapping which Alex has on that recovering left index finger, the legacy of his contact with Pedro Acosta in Assen a couple of weeks ago. Well, this is not a side that any of us wanted to see, or were certainly expecting to see. Both Enea Bastianini and Maverick Vinales missing from the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 garage. We knew Enea was struggling with appendicitis and didn't even travel to Germany, but this is the reason why Maverick Vinales has been ruled out of this German Grand Prix. nasty high side on his outlap this morning, powering up through turn 4. Initially, it looked like Maverick was okay. He quickly felt a dislocation in the left shoulder. That was, as we mentioned, put back in here at the circuit, but he had to go for additional checks at a nearby local hospital, where it was confirmed, sadly, he has suffered a small fracture in the left collarbone. Sadly, as we said, there is no Tech 3 representation here in Germany now.
Such sad news for that particular squad, who we certainly hope will have at least one of their riders back next weekend. Marco Bezzecchi from the front row of the grid for the first time as an Aprilia factory rider. Of course, Bezzecchi took his last front row in the colours of VR46 last season. Of course, you have to go all the way back to Mandalika for the last time we saw Bez on the front row of the grid. And certainly the Aprilia working well in his hands in wet conditions, which it hasn't always, it's fair to say, over the years from Aprilia's point of view. Bezzecchi then from third on the grid will, I guess, also feel he's got very little to lose. But these conditions are going to provide such a challenge as the weekend, or as the afternoon was unfolding. Conditions were improving and gradually drying out as we went through Moto2 qualifying, but the rain has very much hit once again. The rain has fallen with great intensity once again, so without question we are in for a full wet sprint.
So as you mentioned, it's a very under-strength KTM effort now here in Germany. Their lead rider, Pedro Acosta, at 5th place on the grid, a former Moto2 and Moto3 race winner. Well, let's go down and get some reaction to what's happening down at Red Bull KTM Tech 3. Alberto Giroviola, Enea Bastianini's crew chief joins. Jack.
Yeah, of course, Albi, one of the most experienced crew chiefs along pit lane, and obviously a great shame for Tech 3. But just looking at the race ahead in these conditions, the rain just starting to get a little bit lighter. How difficult is this to manage? How tough is it to get the bike set up perfect with so little track time?
Yeah, the condition when are changing so much is difficult for us, especially to understand which kind of tire we have to put, because sometimes the soft become easily too soft and start to move. So I think that in this condition, maybe for the sprint, the soft can do his job. But if it's gonna decrease even more, probably the medium is more stable, especially on this track.
It's going to be a very late decision, you'd imagine, then, just to see how much water there is out on the track. The sighting lap is going to be very important to understand whether the soft or the medium is going to be the correct option.
Yeah, maybe some riders can do the sighting lap with one of the two choice on the rear, just to understand if it's better or not. Okay, it's only one lap, but give you the information that maybe you need. And then on the grid, you have to take the final decision, checking also the radar, and understand what will happen in 20 minutes.
Expecting any more rain, or do you think this is it?
Yeah, a bit is coming still, so maybe for just a few laps like a sprint race, I would go with the soft maybe on the rear.
Thanks, Albi, appreciate it.
Thank you, bye.
Yeah, some cracking insight there from Alberto Giroviola. Of course, he'll be familiar to many of you at home, side by side, wasn't he, for Andrea Dovizioso's long-standing success with the factory Ducati team. We just saw a glimpse of Johan Zarco. The Frenchman aside, starting second on the grid. It's been a bit of a punishing weekend for some of the other Honda entrants. Luca Marini back in action for the first time since Silverstone. He's 14th on the grid, although he did out-qualify his teammate Joan Mir, who starts 16th. They were, of course, qualified 15th and 17th, but everybody behind Maverick Vinales will be pumped up one place on the grid with the Spaniards' absence.
Pit lane is open then for this side tonight. It will be open for 5 minutes, so it does mean that the riders, if they wish, do have the option to do potentially a couple of sighting laps. Many riders might well take up that option just to have the best information and as much information as possible on the track surface. You can come up pit lane if you want and go back out again for a further sighting lap, because it is a bit of a mystery tour. Of course, the last time the MotoGP riders were out on the racetrack, you have to go back over 3 hours for qualifying too. Conditions not too dissimilar, but of course riders are very keen to have as much information as they can as to the very up-to-date track conditions.
Yeah, going to keep a close eye on Zarco. Surely he's going to be going gangbusters at the start of this sprint. He's got absolutely nothing to lose, has he, from the middle of that front row. He's already shown us this weekend and earlier on this season just what a skilled wet weather specialist he can be. Who will ever forget that success in front of his home crowd at Le Mans in that dramatic flag-to-flag battle a few rounds ago. There's Fabio Quartararo, who was rather angry at the end of play this morning, FP2, when once again Yamaha's got to get their heads around that, haven't they? The ride height device sticking on, and we're looking at Pekka Bagnaia, who it's fair to say sunk without a trace in the rain conditions this morning in Q2. A 129.753 from the Italian. Not only was it only good enough for 11th place, middle of the fourth row, but he was almost a full 2 seconds behind his factory Ducati teammate Marc Marquez. No great reason for too much optimism, you feel, based on this morning on Bagnaia's prospects of working his way forward in this sprint, but let's never discount a 3-time Grand Prix world champion, a 2-time MotoGP world champion, but he's got it all on Lewis from the middle of that fourth row, and when we consider how off the pace he was in the wet this morning.
Doesn't bode very well for him, does it? Although, of course, he did qualify 11th on the grid back in Qatar, and of course came through on the Sunday to finish in 2nd place. Only got a couple of points in the sprint, but this is one of those days, one of those sprints where it's just all about keeping yourself on the black stuff. Johann Zarco is taking that option to do an extra sighting lap and riding through pit lane, but of course you saw plenty of spray being kicked up as you drop down the waterfall from turns 11 to 12, so you feel for Pekka Bagnaia, he's going to be in the middle of all of that spray. He's not going to have a lot of clear track ahead of him, both in terms of bikes and also in terms of water being thrown up in his face on the opening lap.
Johann Zarco comes to 2nd place on the grid. He has never had a sprint podium, has Zarco, and this is sprint number 50. Zarco, Quartararo, Morbidelli, Binder, Jack Miller, Pekka Bagnaia, few riders that have competed in all of our previous 49 sprints. Maverick Vinales was in that club as well, but unfortunately, of course, we know Maverick sadly sidelined. So can Johann Zarco, in sprint attempt number 50, finally make his way to a medal ceremony on a Saturday afternoon?
Total 17 different riders have put a sprint podium medal around their neck over the course of our 2.5 years of the sprints. Miguel Oliveira, one of those, of course, a year ago, taking his first and to this point only sprint podium. Can Johann Zarco, 1 year on, also become a new sprint podium finisher here at the Sachsenring? You feel he's got a much better chance in these conditions. Certainly if this sprint were dry, you'd expect Johann Zarco to be fighting something of a rear guard action to stay up at the front. Of course, what he did so well in qualifying this morning was keep that medium rear wet tyre alive. Certainly got quicker and quicker as the qualifying session unfolded. Certainly from the insight we've already heard from Alberto Giubiolo. Will Zarco still persist with that and persist with that medium rear, a tyre that he knows from qualifying?
Well, we just saw there he is again, the sprint superstar of 2025. 120 sprint points have been fought for so far this year. Marc Marquez has collected all but 3 of them. What a record that is, 117 points. Things are looking good, aren't they, right now, before the factory Aprilia team? A double podium last time out in the dry in Assen for Marco Bezzecchi. He's on screens right now. We're going to welcome back world champion Jorge Martin into the fold next week in Brno. So happy days emerging finally, thankfully, for the factory Aprilia team. Let's get the thoughts pre-sprint of their boss, Paolo Bonora, who joins Jack.
Paolo's the guys were saying it's a good moment for Aprilia at the moment. Great success last time out, now onto the front row for the very first time with Marco. Is the real optimism even in these conditions that there's an opportunity out there today?
Yes, absolutely, an opportunity. A very good qualifying position. He did a very good job, in particular with this tricky condition. And now, before the sprint, it is still adapt on the rear tire because nobody knows which kind of track there will be in the second part of the race. So it will be the key to understand which kind of tire to choose between the soft and the medium.
To make that choice, are you waiting to see what other people do, or have you just got to stick with what you're confident with and what you think is the right decision?
Yeah, absolutely. We have already a plan, and in particular we have already discussed with the rider all the situation. But who knows? Because here, if there is more rain, probably the soft is the correct choice, but at the moment it seems to be that will be a dry situation. Not dry, but no more rain anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. Good luck, Paolo.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Always love listening to Aprilia boss Paolo Bonora talking there as always to Jack. As you can see from these live pictures, the only people using the cover of umbrellas right now are the riders, so clearly the rain has halted, it has stopped. There's a few sort of dignitaries I can see getting photographs without the raincoats on, so yeah, the rain has eased, and we're certainly not going to get a dry sprint, but we might get a drying track, which could be crucial towards the tail end of this 15-lap battle coming up shortly.
Flag-to-flag rules do still apply in the sprints. Of course, highly unlikely we'll get to that point that it's dry enough to get onto slicks, but also be fast enough to win the time back that you lose from changing bikes. But it is worth just reiterating that those rules do still apply. So of course, with a wet sprint declared, a change in climatic conditions, either an increase in the rain or a drying track, will not see this sprint stopped. They will race it to a finish.
Well, Marquez, as mentioned, powered to his 73rd Premier Class pole position this morning. Would it have been a different story had the rider we just saw on screen, Snots, jumped off his Ducati GP24 at turn 8. Frankie Morbidelli was flying on his last lap of the session. He was actually up halfway around before he tipped off at, even in the rain conditions, is a very high-speed get-off going through 8. No great damage done, though, to Frankie's grid position, because he will head row 2 in 4th place. That's the it's qualified top 6 now, 8 of 11 Grand Prix so far this year. So yeah, keep an eye on Morbidelli, because before that tip off at turn 8, he had real strong speed in the wet conditions.
And keep an eye on this man too, Jack Miller. No reason or no wonder he is so relaxed, because he loves these conditions. We've so often seen Jack Miller very strong in wet conditions. He was quick in free practice too earlier on today. So a bit of a qualifying session of extremes for the factory Ducati team earlier on today. Pecco Bagnaia started 11th with Marc Marquez on pole. Let's get some words from Davide Tardozzi with Jack.
Davide, obviously, Mark, the big favourite for this one, but these conditions should make it a little bit more challenging for him, do you think?
Yeah, for sure, because Johan is very fast in this condition. He shows this morning, he shows in Le Mans, so I think that he has nothing to lose. We have to think to the championship, and collecting points is the most important thing. So in the end, I'm sure that Mark will try to win, but I hope and I know that they will go over the limit.
Frustrating for Pecco this morning. What happened exactly?
Yeah, he didn't have grip on the rear tire. Maybe he was too slow in the first 2 laps, and he couldn't put on the right range of temperature the rear tire. That's why. But hopefully we'll have a good start and maybe stay with the top guys.
Thanks, Davide.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the key words there in terms of one of Mark's potential big rivals in this sprint was referencing Johan Zarco. Nothing to lose, which he certainly hasn't in terms of the championship. Zarco having a tough recent run after back-to-back podiums in Le Mans at Silverstone, 12th in the Grand Prix in Assen. His only point-scoring finish in his last 6 starts. I've seen him sort of slip down to the back end of the top 10 in the championship. It looks like it's a level playing field. Lewis, in terms of the tires, we'll cover that off very shortly, because it is just the second front row start of 2025 for Johan Zarco. You just know he's going to be in the mix and going all in for the win in this sprint. Let's get the thoughts of El Ciano boss Lucio Cecchinello, who is with Jack.
Well, Lucio, Mark in Parc Ferme after qualifying, and Davide again then just said they've got a championship to fight for. Johan has nothing to lose. Is that the ethos, to go out there and take advantage of this opportunity that's presented itself?
No, we have to lose, because we want to get the points. The target is to get the points, as many points as possible every race. So I mean, we wish for a solid race, but not necessarily we are going to fight with Mark or necessarily for the podium. I wish we will have a solid race. That's the most important. Also to prepare the race for tomorrow.
We saw him having a long conversation with his crew chief and a couple of other guys, I imagine, about rear tyre choice. Has he made that decision, and what is the thinking?
Correct. I think we will stick with our current decision, which is the medium tyre. Is the same tyre that he used this morning in Q1 and Q2. The same tyre specification. So the truth is that he has a little bit less edge grip, but he feels that eventually, if the asphalt is not so wet like it is now, if it will remain like this, maybe he can have a little bit more drive by the end of the race.
Good luck, Lucio.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to LCR boss Lucio Cecchinello. While we were listening to that interview about the Frenchman's prospects of maybe getting his first medal in the sprint era, we just saw there the luckless Maverick Vinales inside the Tech 3 garage with the sling, his left arm in the sling after that fractured left collarbone. Looks like we might have a late tyre change here. Yeah, new tyre choice. Johann Zarco's dropped down to the soft front compound.
To the medium, I believe that is, from soft to medium. Previously, we had information from Michelin that every rider had gone medium front, soft rear. Is Johann Zarco just sticking with what he knows from qualifying on qualifying 1 and 2 earlier on today when he went for the medium rear? Certainly worked for him over the course of the qualifying sessions, both 1 and 2. He's got stronger the longer those sessions went on, so we'll hopefully get some further up-to-date information. Certainly on our timing screens once the sprint gets underway, we'll be able to confirm that for you. But potentially Zarco, a bit of an outlier. Of course, even with the comments there of Lucio Cecchinello, certainly we're in the opinion here in the commentary box that Zarco has got nothing to lose, and I think it extends farther back than that on the grid behind Marc Marquez. Zarco, Bezzecchi, Morbidelli and Acosta, I would say, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, are all in a position where they might as well throw the kitchen sink at this and try and get themselves a gold medal for a sprint, because for sure, if we've got dry conditions tomorrow, they're not going to be in the same position to challenge Marc Marquez.
He's changed the front because everybody was on the medium front. He's dropped down to the soft, so there was a late switch there from Johann Zarco. Here is the 10th grid then, building up to this 15-lap sprint here in the Sachsenring. Joan Mir, 16th place, qualified in 17th, promoted after the unfortunate injury from Maverick Vinales. Just shows missing out on a direct place in Q2, how it can completely alter the complexion of your weekend. He felt like he had the pace yesterday in practice to be inside the top 10, missed out, and now finds himself stuck way down the grid on the 6th row. Jack, down to you for some up-to-date tyre info.
Yeah, only 2 riders on the grid will be opting for the medium rear tyre. One of them, Luca Marini. The other one, as Lucio Cecchinello told us, Johann Zarco, will be going with the medium rear tyre.
Thanks for that, Jack. So we do have 2 riders going in a different route on the grid, and Johann Zarco is certainly the chief among them to keep an eye on from the front row of the grid. Potentially regret that choice in the early stages before the sprint comes to him. It's the 2nd ever wet sprint, as you can see, after the British Grand Prix in 2023, where Alex Marquez took, what was it, his first sprint win. But 15 laps around the Sachsenring is still an awful long time, and it's an awful long time for this sprint to chop and change between riders on those different tyre combinations.
The Marquez siblings going to finally see their stranglehold on these sprints in 2025 relinquished. 10 sprints so far this year, and in all of them it's been a Marquez 1-2. A big ash, you feel, for Alex to keep that incredible record going from the 2nd row in 6th place, but to work his way through on Acosta, Morbidelli, Bezzecchi, Zarco before he could even think about locking horns with brother Mark. Full focus in the zone already. Assen last time out, his 10th career sprint victory. Amazing to think, coming into this season, Mark had won just 1 sprint in Aragon last year, and now he's won 9 of the opening 10. Zarco, then, you really do feel it's gangbuster time, isn't it, for the Frenchman. He turns 35 next week. Well, that will be some early birthday present if he could collect a gold medal. A medal of any colour, I think he'd be pretty happy with, having never finished on a sprint podium.
So Pecco Bagnaia looking to plot his way through from 11th on the grid. Of course, normally the sprints are spoken about as gathering information for the Sunday race. Well, that's not really what they're after here. If the weather forecast to be believed, we're expecting a dry 30-lap German Grand Prix tomorrow, so this sprint won't be all that representative as to what we see tomorrow. This is purely about the 12 points and the gold medal as Marc Marquez gazes into the distance and the run down to turn 1.
All about trying to build on what is already a commanding 68-point lead in the World Championship. We're just reaching the halfway stage of 2025, and only Alex Marquez sitting within 100 points of Marc at the moment. It just shows what unbelievable start it has been to his new journey as a factory Ducati rider. Let's not forget as well the points he threw in the bin and threw in the gravel trap when he was leading in Austin, certainly in contention for the victory in Jerez. So there's been a lot of points that have gone begging as far as Marc Marquez is concerned. Otherwise, there may be nobody that's been going to be able to be within 100 points of him reaching the halfway point. There is Morbidelli, looked really fast in the wet this morning before there was that high-speed crash at turn 8. He leads row 2 ahead of the 2 Spaniards, Acosta and Alex. Looking forward to seeing what Acosta can do. Actually, we know he's shown some potential, even as a rookie last year on the wet setup KTM RC16. His last Grand Prix podium was in the torrential rain in Thailand last October. KTM's last podium full stop that was, wasn't it? And Zarco then gets himself ready. Well, he's got the shark helmet. We've been through some shark conditions, haven't we? He's got a shark behind him on the grid as well, hasn't he, with Pedro Acosta starting right behind him in 5th place.
Pedro Acosta looking pumped up there, wasn't he, on the 2nd row of the grid. Just the final well wishes from his crew chief Paul Trevathan. Pedro Acosta, I think he's firmly in that club of riders with nothing to lose. And Alex Marquez, I think, summed this up very, very well when I asked him yesterday about the wet conditions. He said, yeah, it's less demanding but higher risk.
First ever front row start for the factory Aprilia team for Marco Bezzecchi. He really is firing on all cylinders right now after his double podium last time out in Assen. Second front row start of the campaign for Johan Zarco as he goes for a first ever sprint rostrum. But Marc Marquez in his 200th MotoGP weekend, starting from pole position, a position he's used to here in the Sachsenring. Can he reign in the rain here in Germany?